Hi guys, good morning. Welcome to the second day of hearing me read aloud The Sign of the Beaver. So I guess before we start, I'll show you our guest visitor. She's up today, Lily. Hi Lily, say hi to the class. Okay, so we will start now. Let me put my phone down. Okay, my friends. So if you could please open up your books to page, let's see what to do. 120, chapter 23. Ready? Matt filled his days with work. He made the cabin trim. Where the clay had dried and crumbled away between the logs, he brought new mud, strengthened it with pebbles, and packed the spaces tightly. On the inside, he crinked every tiny crack to make the room snug. The pile of logs stacked against the cabin wall grew steadily higher. His meager harvest was safely stored away. The corn, the little he had managed to save from the deer and crows, had all been shucked. Sitting by the fire after his supper, he scraped the dried kernels from the cobs, remembering the many long evenings at home when he and his sister Sarah had been set to the same work with a corn scraper. Sarah would laugh now to see him rubbing away with an old clamshell like an Indian. Some of the ears of corn he had hung against the wall by the twisted husks, as he had seen his mother do. She had said once they were like scraps of sunshine in the dark days. Overhead, he hung strips of pumpkin on ropes of vine strung from wall to wall. They would be ready for his mother to make into pies. In a corner leaned the old flour sack overflowing with nuts he had gathered, hickory and butternut, and even the acorns he had once thought proper food only for squirrels. On the shelf ranged birch baskets filled with dried berries and the wild cranberries he had discovered, shining like jewels along the boggy shores of the pond. They were puckery to the tongue, but when his mother came, she would bring sugar, and the stewed cranberries would make a fine treat with her bread of white flour. Matt forced himself to eat sparingly of these things. The corn he regarded as a sort of trust. His father had planted it and would be counting on it to feed the family through the winter. And some must be saved for the spring planting. Proud, though, he was of his harvest. Matt knew in his heart that it was far from enough. The hunt for food would be never-ending. Hour after hour, with his bow, Matt trampled through the forest, the dog beside him. There was not much game to hunt these days. More often than not, his snares were empty. Soon the animals would be buried deep in burrows. Twice he had glimpsed the caribou moving through the trees. When he had little hope of bringing down any large animal with his light arrows, once in a long while he succeeded in shooting a duck or a muskrat. The squirrels were too quick for him, although the dog was certainly not much of a hunter. He did occasionally track down some small creature, but he also had to eat his share, sometimes more than his share, because Matt could not resist those beseeching eyes. Truth to tell, they were both hungry much of the time. Luckily, they would not starve with the pond and creeks teeming with fish. Matt knew that for many months of the year, fish filled the Indian cook pots. Luckily, too, fish were easy to catch, though Matt had to be continually twisting and splicing new lines from vines and spruce roots. Mornings now, he had to shatter a skim of ice on the pond. Soon, he would have to cut holes with his axe and let his lines down deep. He shivered to think of it. It was the cold that bothered him most. His homespun jacket was still sound, since he had little use for it in the warm weather. But his breeches were threadbare. One knee showed naked through a gaping hole, and the frayed legs stopped a good 5 inches above his ankles. His linen shirt was thin as a page of his father's Bible, and so small for him that it threatened to split every time he moved. Even inside the cabin, he was scarcely warm enough. The moment he ventured outside, his teeth chattered. He thought enviously of the Indian's deerskin leggings, but a deer was far beyond his prowess as a hunter. There were 2 blankets on his pine bed, his father's and his own. Why couldn't one of them cover him in the daytime as well as in the night? He spread a blanket out on the floor and hacked it with his axe and his knife, using his worn-out breeches as a pattern. From the leftover scraps, he carefully pulled threads and twisted them together. He had seen the Indian woman using bone needles, and he searched about outside the cabin till he found some thin, hard bits of bone. These he shaved down with his knife. He ruined 3 bits trying to poke a hole through the bone before he thought to try a thin slit instead to hold the thread. Finally, he managed to sew his woolen pieces together. He thrust his legs into the shapeless breeches and gathered the top about his waist with a bit of rope. He was mighty pleased with himself. He was going to be forever hauling them up, and they were sure to trip him if he had to run, but at least he could kneel on the ice and pull in his lines. From 2 rabbit skin, he made some mittens without thumbs. He had no stockings, and his moose hide moccasins were wearing thin. He decided he could stuff them with scraps of blanket or even with duck feathers. He remembered that once, in a downpour, a teen had shown him how to line his moccasins in dry moss to soak up the rain. Perhaps moss could soak up the cold as well, and there was plenty of it about. His most satisfying achievement was his fur hat. For this, he knew, he must have more fur. In the woods, a teen had once pointed out to him a deadfall, constructed of heavy logs, so balanced that they would fall with deadly accuracy on an animal that attempted to steal the bait inside. Beaver and otter were caught in such traps. Etienne explained, sometimes even bear. Now Matt determined to make one for himself, perhaps a small one. It would take a very large log even to stun a strong animal, and he had no wish to come upon a wounded bear. Much as he would like a bearskin, he would try for a smaller animal. He felled and trimmed 2 good-sized trees. Setting the logs on lighter posts was a feat of delicate balance that took him hours of patient trial and error. Over and over they crashed down, threatening his toes and fingers. Finally, they held to his satisfaction, and gingerly he slipped 3 fish inside the trap. To his astonishment, on the 3rd morning, he found an animal lying under the fallen logs, so nearly dead that it was no task to club it. It was smaller than the others he had seen playing along the banks. A fisher, perhaps? That night, he and the dog feasted on crackling bits of roast meat. It was strong flavored, and he knew the Indians did not care to eat it, but he could not be so choosy. Other strips he hung over the fire to smoke. There was also a scant amount of yellow fat, used sparingly. A spoonful of that fat would make his usual fish diet taste like a banquet. The real treasure was the pelt, heavy and lustrous. He worked on it slowly as he had watched the Indian women work. With the sharp-edged stone, he scraped away every trace of fat and flesh from the skin, washed it in the creek, and for days in his spare hours rubbed and stretched it to make it soft and pliable. Then he set to work with his bone needle. He was enormously proud of the cap he finished. Sackness himself would have envied it. Most of the work he had done by firelight. He longed for candles. He ate his supper by the light of split pine branches set in a crack in the chimney. They gave light aplenty, but they smoked and dripped sticky pitch, and he was always afraid he might drop off to sleep and wake up to find the log chimney afire. At any rate, after a day of chopping and tramping, he was tired enough to go to bed with the dark. So often, as he did the squawk work that a teen would have despised, thoughts of his mother filled his head. He imagined her moving about the cabin, humming her little tunes as she beat up a batch of cornbread, shaking out the boardcloth at the door, for of course she would not let them eat at the bare table. He could see her sitting at the firelight in the evening, her knitting needles clicking as she made a woolen sock for him. Sometimes he could almost hear the sound of her voice. And when he shut his eyes, he could see her special smile. He tried to think of ways to please her. She would need new dishes for the good meals she would cook. He whittled out 4 wooden trenches and 4 clean new bowls, rubbing them smooth with sand from the creek. He made a little brush to clean them with from a birch sapling, carefully splitting the ends into 2 thin fibers. In the same way, he made a sturdy birch broom to sweep the floor. Then he set himself a more difficult task, a cradle for the baby. With only an axe and his knife, the work took all his patience. His first attempts were fit only for kindling, but when the cradle was done, he was proud of it. It was clumsy, perhaps, but it rocked without bumping. and there wasn't a splinter anywhere to harm a baby's skin. Sitting by the fire, it seemed a promise that soon his family would be here. When he had a few more rabbit skins, he would make a soft coverlet. For Sarah, he made a corn husk doll with corn silk hair. He was surprised at how much he looked forward to Sarah coming. Back at home, she had been nothing but a pesky child, always following him about and pestering him to be taken along wherever he was going. Now, he remembered the way she had run to meet him when he came home from school, pigtails flying, eyes shining, demanding to know everything that had happened there. Sarah hated fiercely being a girl and having no school to go to. She would be full of curiosity in the forest. She wasn't afraid like most girls. She was spunky enough to try almost anything. She was like that Indian girl, Eteen's sister, with a pity they would have known each other. Chapter 24, page 127. Matt stood looking up at the sky over the clearing. "It's going to snow," he told the dog. "You can feel it, can't you?" The dog lifted its nose, testing the promise in the air. Matt reckoned he had been lucky so far. The heavy snows had not come. There had been flurries, thin and swirling, sifting through the trees. Many mornings he had waked to find a coating of white on the cabin roof, which would melt away under the noonday sun. Today, everything seemed different. The sky was the color of his mother's plate. The brown, withered leaves of the oak trees hung motionless from the branches. 3 cows searched noisily among the dry corn stalks. A flock of small birds hopped nervously under the pines. "It's almost Christmas," he said out loud. He could not remember for sure how many weeks belonged to each month. Sometimes he was not even certain that he had remembered to cut a notch every day. Every day was like the day before, and Christmas Day, when it came, would not have anything to mark it from all the others. He tried to put out of his mind the thought of his mother's Christmas pudding. "We'd better get an extra firewood," he said, and the dog scrambled eagerly after him. Late in the day, the snow began soundlessly, steadily. Before dark, it had laid a white blanket over the trees and the stumps in the cabin. When Matt and the dog went outside at bedtime, and the chilly whiteness reached over his moccasins and closed around his bare ankles, they were both thankful to hurry inside again. Next morning, in the darkness of the cabin, Matt made his way to the door. He could scarcely push it open. The bank of snow outside reached almost to the latch. He stared at it in alarm. Was he going to be a prisoner in his own cabin? With all his preparations, he had never thought of a shovel. His axe would be about as much use as a teaspoon. He set himself the hewing of a slab of firewood to make some sort of blade. By the time he had dug a few feet of pathway, the sun was high. He stepped into a dazzling white world. Now, at last, he could make use of the snowshoes that hung on the cabin wall. Eagerly, he strapped the bindings about his legs and climbed up out of the narrow patch he had dug. The snowshoes held him lightly. He stood poised on the snow like a duck on water. But with his first steps, he discovered that he could not even waddle like a duck on land. The clumsy hoops got in each other's way, one of them forever getting trapped beneath the other. All at once, he got the knack of it, and he wanted to shout out loud. He trampled from one of his snares to another, waiting every few moments for the dog, who floundered happily behind him. The snares were buried deep and empty, and he set them higher, just in case some animal might venture out in its burrow. Then he trampled all the way to the pond for sheer pleasure of it. Coming back through the woods, he marveled on his own tracks, like the claw prints of a giant bird. Suddenly, he realized that he was happy, as he had never been in the weeks since Eteen had gone away. He was no longer afraid of the winter ahead. The snowshoes had set him free. The cabin was warm and welcoming. He melted snow in his kettle and made a tea of tips of hemlock. He shelled and crushed a handful of acorns and boiled them with a strip of pumpkin. Afterward, for the first time in weeks, he took down Robinson Crusoe, reading by the firelight. He felt drowsy and contented. Life on a warm island in the Pacific might be easier, but tonight, Matt thought, that he wouldn't for a moment have given up his snug cabin buried in the snow. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 24. Don't read the last chapter yet. I know it's so hard, but let's do it together tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, we'll read chapter 25. Okay, so let's look at some of your questions for today. So one of your first questions says, sorry, I'm just opening it up again. It says, here we go. Ready for winter, cite the evidence. So you're going to notice on this page, I already have for you all of your questions with the page numbers. So for instance, we'll do a couple together. The first one, what did Matt use to scrape the corn off the husks? If you said an old clamshell, you're correct. So please make sure you write in there that he did use an old clamshell. If you look at the second one, what was in the birch baskets on the shelves? So that's page 121. If you don't remember, go to that page. And your answer for sure should include dried berries and wild cranberries. So make sure that goes in there because that is what you're going to read on that page. Okay, so if you keep going a little further, you're going to get to the third question. I guess we'll do some more. How did Matt make a needle? All right, so now he knows how to make all these awesome things because of his friend at teen. He knows how to do this now. So what does he do? How does he make it? He found a thin, hard bones, he shaved them down, and he cut a slit. So that's on page 123, if you do not remember. And then finally, we might as well just do the last question of this page. It's on pages 124 and 125. What did Matt think about as he did squat work? So what did he think when he was doing all this work around the house? The first thing that popped in his head was his mother, right? He said that he was picturing his mom humming while she was sewing at night. And he said that when he closed his eyes, he felt that he saw her smile. So it was his mom that came to his mind. Okay, fifth grade. So when you go to the next page today, it is making what you need. So this here, what I'm looking for is to describe how Matt made the things he needed. So you're gonna look at his pants, right? You're gonna look and see what did he need for that? How did Matt, I'm gonna read it again. Describe how Matt made the things he needed, okay? So when you look at the pants, he cut quilt with an axe and his knife. He pulled strings from scraps used from bone he needed to sew. Those are some answers. And when you go to the right, you're going to see the hat, which he was so proud of, he said. What did he first have to do? He had to catch an animal in the deadfall trap. He scraped the hind, he washed it, he rubbed it, he stretched it, and this took days. And then it was finally soft, and then he was able to make it. So that's what I'm going to be looking for in some of those answers. And then finally, I believe this is you have 2 more pages. So this one is looking ahead in your opinion. So again, these 2 questions are completely opinion. So again, some of your friends may have completely different answers, but that's okay. The first question is, how will Matt celebrate Christmas? How do you think? You tell me. Make sure it's complete sentences. You're using your correct punctuation. You're starting each sentence with a capital letter. And make sure you check your work, please. And the second question is, why is Matt no longer afraid of the winter ahead? And I just read that on the very last page of chapter 24. And at the next page, what this one is, who is that? I want you to see if you can try to figure out who is who. And tomorrow, before I go ahead and I read the final chapter, I will go over with you the answers of this page. So just to help you out, you are going to write either Matt, at teen, or both on the line where it shows. Now that is okay. You can write M for Matt, A for at teen, and you can write B for both, okay? So just to help you out, the first one says, does not want to learn white man signs. We all know that is, you guessed it, at teen. Okay, my friends, it was so nice being able to read to you today. And tomorrow morning, make sure you click on my YouTube video again and you can hear me read chapter 25. We'll go over the rest of your questions and I will be more than happy to go over the answers on this page right here. Who is that? Okay? Well, I hope you guys finish the rest of your work for today. You're doing a phenomenal job. I miss you guys. I'm sure you miss me too, even though I know you don't want to admit it, but it's been very nice and fun reading to you guys. So till tomorrow, bye.